with other waste practices to achieve the ultimate goal of reducing or eliminating hazardous waste. The following areas are the areas that house Zomix, the physical sciences by which Zomix takes the hazard out of hazardous waste. Depending upon the contaminant that you're dealing with, it will either reduce the contamination by adsorption, absorption, ion exchange, and chemisorption, which are the real power points of Zomix. And the effect would be the neutralization and stabilization of the waste. Remember what I said before, that the formulation for Zomix is proprietary. It is a closely guarded secret. It is not patented for a very specific and unique reason. But we make no secret that the base mineral in Zomix is the natural zeolite. The natural zeolite and its technology and its ability has been known for many, many years. The ion exchange ability of the zeolites have been known, have been tested, but there is a problem with the natural zeolite in that while it is good and the ionic exchange is very powerful, when it's exposed to certain acids and salts, that exchange tends to reverse itself and the contaminant can come right back out into the environment. The interesting thing about Zomix and how Zomix is different than zeolite is that the Zomix formulation has been able to boost up the power of the natural zeolite while controlling and eliminating its drawbacks. So what happens when you're dealing with Zomix and the hazardous waste, this is an artist rendering of the molecule of the Zomix. And from a non-technical point of view, what happens in the ionic exchange abilities of the Zomix, in the zeolite in combination with the other materials in the Zomix, is that the molecule of the contaminant, like lead, mercury, or cadmium, whatever, will go inside the structure of the zeolite. There's a tremendous, I believe it's a negative imbalance, is that what it is? A net negative imbalance in the molecule of zeolite. So in a frenzy to achieve neutrality, the exchange takes place. The other ingredients that go into the Zomix, when the contaminant goes into cell structure, collapses around it. And it entombs it, forming a permanent seal, so that that contaminant cannot leak out into the environment. One of the first questions that we were asked to prove by the DoD was, well, how permanent is permanent? How do I know 50 years from now that this bad stuff is not going to come back out into the environment and create even a worse problem? The answer to that question of how permanent is permanent is that Zomix has been formulated to pass the most stringent tests available today. Its formulation was meant to pass and exceed the stringent requirements of the California DTSC. California, we believe, is probably one of the most stringent nations in the world as far as environmental compliance and their responsiveness to the environment. And Zomix, the post-sorbed contaminant, will pass the TCLIP, the toxicity characteristic leaching procedure, the MEP, the California Waste Extraction Test, the paint filter test, the TTLCs, and the STLCs. These are the tests that we must go through, we must pass, to define, well, are you dealing with the hazardous waste or not, or will your waste pollute the environment? One of the big advantages that we've developed with the DoD and working with them, as well as with the RCRA regulations, we were first presented with the question, well, is this considered to be a treatment? Do I need a treatment permit for it? The regulations are very onerous, and they provide a barrier to many, many technologies. But for Zomix and Pacific Suma, they presented a pathway of opportunity because the regulations are intended to not only to prevent the harming our environment, but they're also meant to show the way to achieve environmental compliance. And we found a pathway, we believe, and it was confirmed by many state regulators, how Zomix can be employed. We took the approach and went through a rather extensive research to find out that there was a doorway into the regulations where Zomix you did not need a treatment permit to use Zomix, primarily because Zomix is an absorbent, and the regulations specifically exempt sorbents under the conditions here. People first add absorbent material to waste in a container, as defined in the regulations, and persons adding waste to an absorbent are excluded from requiring a treatment permit. The first thing you need to do when there's a spill or an unlawful discharge is you must contain it. The first reaction, obviously, is to put sorbents. People do it all day long. That's why you don't need a permit to use Zomix, because it is an absorbent. In trying to, we wanted to determine at this point, well, how effective are we as an absorbent? What is the common practice in the field today? So we went to California, went to the Long Beach Naval Shipyard. In 1992, according to their Tanner 2 reports, Long Beach Naval Shipyard disposed of approximately 17,000 tons of hazardous waste. Of the 17,000 tons, we identified approximately 9,000 tons which were appropriate for material to be sorbed. When you dispose of a liquid hazardous waste, you cannot just take your liquid and put it into a drum and haul it off to a hazardous landfill. It must be sorbed to the point where it passes what's called a paint filter test, so that if that drum rots away or the truck carting it to the landfill falls over, that will not release out into the environment. We also further assumed that of the 9,000 tons, the base commander of there decided to use what's commonly known as kitty litter, speedy dry, clay dry, the clays of the world. And the clays of the world are dirt cheap primarily because they're dirt. So we compared, for purposes of this demonstration, to see how we stand against the competition, the current practices, we compared Zomix to oil dry or kitty litter. And we compared kitty litter at 13 cents a pound, and we priced Zomix at 89 cents a pound, which is almost 7 times what they pay for kitty litter. We did that really to try to make us look bad and to see, just how do we stand up. Some very interesting things started to develop from this slide. We found that in order for the DOD to accurately determine what is the true per gallon cost for the disposal of that hazardous waste, there's a lot of things that must be considered or factored in to develop the cost. It's not just the cost of the sorbent. We've developed what we now call the Zomix total life cycle approach. And that takes into a consideration all of the costs that are involved in the management and disposal of hazardous waste. Going back to the Long Beach Naval Shipyard, I know there's a lot of numbers there, but there's just a few numbers that are important, and maybe you can just highlight them. It's just nothing more than math. We took the 9,000 tons of liquid hazardous waste, we multiplied it out by the weight per gallon to get the amount, what was the weight of material that we needed, or we were sorbing up. We then took kitty litter and we did the test, the sorbency test. It takes 48 pounds of kitty litter to sorb 1 gallon of liquid to the point where it can pass the paint filter test. The rest was pure volume and math. How many barrels do you need to take to absorb the 9,000 tons, put it into a barrel, and have it hauled off as hazardous waste? In this particular case, you needed 368,000 barrels. The disposal costs that they were experiencing averaged approximately $250 a drum for the base commander of the hazmat team to have that hazardous waste hauled off. In addition to that, they were paying approximately, I have the cost of the barrels, they were paying $35 per barrel, as well as the cost, the amount that the Zomix needed. So the total cost for the sorbent, the barrels to put it in, and the per barrel charge for the contractor to haul it off and dispose of it was approximately $118 million under those assumptions. We then compared this to Zomix. We took the same 9,000 tons of material. Zomix, however, is a superior sorbent, where it takes 48 pounds of kitty litter to pick up a gallon. It takes approximately 9 to 13 pounds of Zomix to sorb that same gallon. Now it's just a matter of math, because you're using less material, you have less volume. Only the total weight of the stored material was 47 million pounds compared to 127 million. Because you're dealing with less material, you only need 112,000 barrels compared to the 368,000. $250 a barrel times that came out to approximately 28 million. The cost of the Zomix was 25 million compared to 13 million with the kitty litter. But the total cost, the total life cycle of the Zomix, the base commander, had Zomix been available to him, would have had the option of spending 57 million compared to 118 million, or a savings of approximately 52%. And this is just not even considering anything else of the abilities of Zomix, just as a superior sorbent. What we said to the DoD is why you should be buying our material now. You're a better picker-upper. You may be more expensive in the front, but if you look at all of your budgets, what you're all concerned with, you can save significant dollars by bringing in the total life cycle approach. The Zomix is not only a superior sorbent, but it is also a stabilizer. And as a stabilizer, the post-sore material can be disposed of as non-hazardous. That's a pretty significant claim to make, and I think I need to spend just a few minutes in explaining that statement. The reason why Zomix can be sorbed and can be disposed of as non-hazardous lies within the regulation and the definition of hazardous waste. RCRA states that it is the generator's responsibility to determine are they throwing out sour milk or are they throwing out hazardous waste. The only way to do that is to test it. The most common test is the T-clip. The regulations state that if you are dealing with a waste that is not a listed waste, a characteristic waste, and it does not contain the characteristics of a hazardous waste, which are toxicity, ignitability, flammability, reactivity, corrosivity. And those nutritional levels are not above the threshold, then you are not dealing with the hazardous waste, you are dealing with the solid waste. And as such, it can be disposed of as non-hazardous. Interestingly enough, as we went around to the different installations, we were asked this question, well, you're saying that, I can see that you don't need a SOAR permit to use it, and you're telling me that I can dispose of this as non-hazardous because it doesn't fit within the definitions of a hazardous waste. If you can get the state regulator that I have to deal with to agree, then I certainly will consider using your product. So we started to do that. We wrote to the 50 state regulators, and we asked them not to approve our product because it isn't proper for state regulators to approve products. We asked them to either concur or not concur with the statements that we were making. And the statements were essentially 4 statements. That you don't need a permit to use Zomix, the post-sorbed Zomix material, upon testing, if it is not a listed waste and does not contain the characteristic of a hazardous waste and its constituents are not above the threshold, that material is non-hazardous. And as non-hazardous material, it can be disposed of as non-hazardous, or, if it's appropriate, recycled with the proper one-time notification. I think to date we've got about 40 some odd states that have not only agreed with us, but have gone even further to concur with that. And that accomplished a lot for us because it showed us the mindset of the local regulators, the state regulators that you people are dealing with every day. And we wanted to know what was their universe, what was their concern. And we were quite surprised and pleased at the result. And we have letters from many different states which we can make available to you as to their feeling, to varying degrees, how they concur strictly, some less, some more. So it was very important for us to get a feel of what the local regulators say. So, since it can be disposed of non-hazardous, a side issue that was very important was that we found that Zomix was a very efficient, cost-efficient way to eliminate what's called the cradle-to-grave liability. The reason for that is liability is an issue that exists and is attached only with hazardous waste, not non-hazardous waste. Once your waste goes off as non-hazardous, there is no liability attached, which is a significant savings when you're dealing with potential fines. So we went back to the Long Beach Naval Shipyard, and compared the results of Zomix not only as a superior sorbent, but with the added feature of it being a stabilizer, and that material can now be disposed of as solid waste rather than as hazardous waste. So if you see there, nothing changes on the kitty litter side. On the Zomix side, the numbers stay the same. The only thing that you have eliminated is the $250 per barrel cost. But the savings obviously is dramatic, where before we had a 52% savings. In 1992, had this been available to them, the base commander or the hazmat people would have had the option of spending $118 million or $28 million with Zomix. Significant savings. One of the strong advantages that we recommend for Zomix is that depending upon the material that you're sorbing, the post-sorb material should not be disposed of as solid waste. It can be recycled. It is an ideal aggregate for concrete or asphalt, which really helps you, I think, in your executive order for not only reducing your waste stream by 50%, but also to recycle material into other products where you can get recycling credits. So that was very important. Oh, by the way, we have here, you'll see a rather odd statement that Zomix can be used as a fertilizer. Zomix comes in 3 formulations. The formula Zomix 1 is for organic wastes, Zomix 2 is for inorganic waste, and Zomix 3 is for sewage sludge. We have been approved in the state of New York, where you can replace the lime that they use in the sewage treatment plant without any capital expenditures or equipment. You can put the Zomix in, and the post-treated sewage sludge becomes a super fertilizer. And it takes away the metals that are in the sludge and releases the nutrients that are good for agricultural purposes. So that's a very important market for us in the future. The next slides I'm going to go through kind of quickly. Here we're using Zomix as a treatment, not as a sorbent. We tested Zomix on lead-contaminated soil. This is again dealing with legacy waste. I think this happened to be a shooting range where they took the large ordnance out and they were left with the fines in the material. The pre-treated contamination level was 150 parts per million? 150 parts per million. We treated Zomix, the regulatory level is shown there on the left, 5 parts per million. The post-treated lead or soil was reduced down to 0.43 parts per million, well below regulatory limits. The interesting thing about this, and remember back in the first slides I was talking about the efficiency, it took 1 pound of Zomix to treat 20 pounds of lead-contaminated soil. So the cost efficiency really became, and the economics really started to be dramatic. Next slide was just different, waste that you might be dealing with. Plating slugs, the cadmium, obviously, the pre-treated was significantly higher than the regulatory level. The post-treated well below RICO limitations. Phosphate esters in their hydraulic fluid as well. Incinerator ash, fly ash, etc. I think that's about it. So, I can just stop there. What I'd like to do now, I hope we piqued your curiosity. Zomix has gone through extensive testing over the last 2 years with the Defense Logistics Agency. We were pleased in I believe it was February of this year, where we were awarded a blanket purchase agreement. Zomix has national stock numbers, and the purpose of this trip is really to start to go out to the field in the different installations to introduce an option that provides, I think, a tremendous amount of flexibility and the ability for you to save significant dollars in the budget and help you understand and train you on the use of Zomix so that you'll consider it in your operations. We're here to try to help you as much as we can. Marty is a local representative here, and we certainly would like to make this an opportunity for you to work with the product and I think make your life a lot easier, as well as do a lot of good for our environment. Now, any questions that you might have, I'll be happy to take them. Rick is our technical rep, so it won't be too technical with me.
value to Zomix when it's mixed with
No,
petroleum product?
it's not very good for as a fuel because it's low BTU value and high ash content. That's why we try to break down the fuel by way of the chemical process, and then create the a secondary recycling option through the asphalt recycling, as opposed to incineration. We could have had a high enough BTU value, but incineration as an option isn't present on a national basis. In some areas it's quite restricted, other areas it's still very loose. But no one's going to have a problem with non-hazardous fine material going into asphalt.
What kind of paperwork or whatever would we need? Say we wanted to mix this in with a cement company or have it taken or as recyclable. What kind of paperwork would we need saying this is good to be used in that? Do you have a study or?
Well, what you would do is your overall paperwork past the first time would be greatly reduced because now you're no longer managing a hazardous waste, you're managing a recyclable material.
Right.
So everything you do, what you used to have done, will have been reduced somewhat. There is a first time you're going to have to do somewhat of analysis and then get a letter of expressed intent from the receiver, whether it be asphalt or concrete, that you're going to use it. And really the only thing they want to have is some sort of consistent forecast on volume so they can adjust their own production schedules to work it in.
The T-clip is the initial test?
Right, TCL. Yeah.
Is it approved in the state of New Jersey for use? Can we use it in the state of New Jersey?
Well, we received a letter from the state of New Jersey that has no problem with respect to permitting to go ahead and use it, or for reclassification for material for disposal, which you're required to do by LGR one time anyway. You have to do something to validate that it did exactly what we said it would do. But then you can go ahead and use it because New Jersey is fully authorized.
Yeah, we recommend that the proper procedure, because it is a new technology, the procedure, it's clear that you can use it without a permit, but the next step is to get it, is this a hazardous waste or not? It is highly recommended that when you first establish this procedure and rewrite your rule book, is that you do the T-clip testing. And that T-clip testing is on file. This is your waste stream, these are the characteristics. Here's the post-storm Zomix. Is this hazardous waste? No, it's not. You file a one-time notification with the state, and it goes off as non-hazardous waste. We're also doing this, what we call a turnkey approach in Andrews Air Force Base, where they're using the Zomix to store up their hydraulic fuel or the jet fuel or whatever it is, and they have a contractor that picks it up and brings it to an asphalt plant for recycling into asphalt.
Is that a player for us, Marty?
If we get everybody to use it.
Well, I don't think it's going to work that way. I want to see the product out on the flight line, and then we put it down and let it blow around.
So far, you haven't, your product does the exact same thing as everybody else's for New Jersey, for Maguire's operations. We generate waste oil, jet fuel, and the like. We cleaned up with absorbent pads or whatever. Absorbent pads are non-hazardous. T-clip. So I don't know how you got oil dry as hazardous, but ours, unless it's totally saturated, is not hazardous. In New Jersey, it's still a hazardous waste. It has to be manifested off as a hazardous waste. Spill cleanup is a hazardous waste in New Jersey. So everything else does the same thing. The only thing I would be interested in, as the chief said, is I'd want to see it, to see the ratio of yours to others. That would be the only thing that I could see where it would make a difference for us.
Did I mishear you? Did I say Zomix, the accumulator was non-hazardous?
No, you said in your example, the oil dry
Right.
was hazardous.
Right.
Unless it was totally saturated, I can understand that. If it was totally saturated, I can understand that. The way we use it, and I tested it, the T-clip, and it comes back negative. And we use absorbent pads.
And that's also not
regardless of the analysis? Is it because of its origin?
Well, waste oil is a hazardous waste in New Jersey. That means, spill cleanup is considered a hazardous waste in New Jersey.
Even if, for example, everything came back non-detached, it was
It's
still
a special
regulated.
waste. It's not liquid. It's
Right.
not a B001 because it's flesh point. It's an X waste. In New Jersey, you got special waste, what they call X waste.
Right.
Those are hazardous in New Jersey.
Regardless of the content, even if it comes back, 9.0, it still has.
Yes. No limit to spill cleanup is a hazardous waste, no matter what it picks up, basically.
I would like the opportunity, again, what we're trying to do here is to understand what happens in your universe, because we've got 50 different states and there's 50 different regulations. One of the purposes when I talked to you about the letters that we wrote, we wanted to get an understanding and a feel of what the local regulations state. Because everybody knows what we're doing, so what's happening in the different states. We would like the opportunity to work with the regulators in the state of New Jersey to see how Zomix fits within their discipline and how we can possibly change the regulations. In the area of characteristic waste, we know that we can make hazardous waste non-hazardous. In the areas of listed waste, we feel that we're ahead in time because the only way, as far as I understand, to get rid of listed hazardous waste is through a delisting procedure, if we can do so, which is very expensive and time-consuming. So I think what we need to do is to check the local regulations and see how Zomix works within that, as well as whatever the state says in the letter that they sent back to us.
Yeah, my only comment would be in other states where we've encountered the same thing, that regardless the losses, regardless of what you do, it's always a hazardous waste. We've gotten around that, for lack of a better word, based on two arguments. One being that its recyclability doesn't exist with other absorbent products, so therefore your whole base classification has to be different. So there's a legal argument you can make that based on the fact that you're now dealing with an apple and not an orange, you have to look at it from a different perspective, regulation-wise. So you can't say, well, this is like Missouri, for example, would not do that same thing. Where I understand what you're saying, and I'm not arguing with you because you're absolutely right, but in 10 out of 10 cases where we've gone through this, once you have a chance to deal with the regulators and say, well, you have to remember, you're not dealing with what you're used to dealing with. You're not dealing with the patent. You're not dealing with the studio drive, because no matter what anybody says, you're never going to have a secondary recyclable purpose for either one of those materials. You are with this, so you have to adopt a different mindset and a different perspective. Variances of what we've got in other facilities who've gone through the same thing where they said, if it's a spill, it's a waste guarantee. Well, no, again, that's because regardless of what you do with that pad's going to landfill somewhere. This stuff is never going to a landfill again, so you have to look at it from a different perspective. And that's the only way to address it, and that just takes time where we come in and liaise with the regulators and get them to accept that premise. It's legally sound and it's scientifically sound.
You can get them to change their regulations.
Well, it's not so much changing regulations to recognize that this particular material may not fit in with the rule of what the regulations say, because you're not talking about the same thing.
We found in other states, I can't speak to Jersey regs, but we certainly will address it. There's a difference in when you're dealing with a byproduct or waste. If it's a recyclable waste, it's not considered to be, it's not a RIPA waste.
The term waste isn't used in the vernacular.
Right.
It's not a
It is now
recyclable
a
waste, it's a
recyclable
recyclable
product,
material.
and it falls under other definitions or other guidelines. What we have found is that the regulations are they're difficult, but there is a pathway of opportunity where the end result, the purpose of the regulations is to prevent the introduction of hazardous waste into the environment. That's exactly what our product does. It prevents that by eliminating the hazardous waste. In many cases, we'll have to deal with the state regulators, not so much to change the regulations, but to point out to them where their regulations allow for this particular use. And obviously, before we proceed, that issue is valid and has to be addressed.
But we can, in short order, we can take care of that and get it written. I've no doubt that we faced this issue before. And again, based on from a legal perspective and scientific perspective, you can't say this is the same as an absorbent pad. You just can't. So it has to be governed differently.
So what you're saying is we have to go out with with an asphalt contractor and work in that arena. That's the only way we can regenerate this.
No, I'm not saying that's the only way, but based on what the gentleman said regarding the position of the state law, which is always a waste regardless of its content, that would be the way you get around that, and it wouldn't be your responsibility. That would be specifically Marty's in my hand. We would find the asphalt company. We would.
Well, he's the keeper of the key. Marty keeps the key.
It's considered a waste in New Jersey, okay? But once you get it out of the state and you're going to dispose of it, it's not a hazardous waste anymore. Waste oil is not a hazardous waste in the rest of the country.
We may not be specifically.
In other words, I dispose of our building materials as non-hazardous. It goes off as New Jersey hazardous.
Right.
They don't pay in non-hazardous because where it's ending up is non-hazardous. And I think it's irrelevant, but
It
as
is.
I say, the sorting pads, the speed driver, we use are non-hazardous also.
What when you get outside the realm of petroleum material?
95% of our still clean up is petroleum.
You would get like a high benzene content from the fuel, for example. Some places taking that as not have. That must be arguably the same. It's news to me. I've never seen it.
Unless the
And there's
pads,
usually
unless the pads are so saturated that they flash, it came back as non-hazardous.
As they're using 3M.
I don't know what manufacturer. Steve, do you know?
Yeah, most of them are 3M.
Is Zomix been tested in marine environments? I mean, what's the specific gravity when mixed with petroleum products in water?
I can't tell you off the top of my head what specific gravity is. It has been used in marine environments to, you want to handle how you put it? We differ on our view of how it can be used in a marine
Okay,
environment.
I deal with the team here, the Coast Guard team here in Fort Dix. What we do is we deal on a national level with spills, both that are in the marine environment and impact shorelines. Has Zomix been tested on shoreline cleanup as absorbent?
No, it has not been tested on shoreline cleanup. We've done testing, and again, Rick and I have a difference of opinion on that. We've done tests where when you have oil floating on top of the water, the normal thing is to get a boom and you suck it up or whatever it is to get it on and get it out and ship it out. With Zomix, because of its absorptive ability, it will store the material. The problem that we have with Zomix in the mindset of the people today is that it's a sink technology. People don't like sink technology.
So it's greater, it's physical gravity greater than one. So
Right.
it's a sinking.
Right. Although, when you put, if you do a little experiment, put your oil on the water, the Zomix will sink to the bottom, and at the end, what you've got is white sand. So it's not going to hurt the environment in the sea, but it's too much of a psychological barrier for us to overcome. We really kind of stay away from it. It's probably more appropriate for the shore.
What form is the sort of product? Is it fitted drums that's somewhat liquid?
Granular, solid.
Yeah, it's like, it has the consistency of wet sand when it's finished.
So if you lost the drum off the truck and split open, there'd be no release of product at all?
No.
It's like a powder.
It'll never make the situation worse.
So it's not even wettable, it won't even wet a surface that it touches.
No, it won't release liquid. Unless, of course, the balance of liquid to the material is so extreme that there's clearly free-flowing liquid. Once it's in the absorbed state, it'll even pass the liquid release test, which is PSI. Once it holds it, it holds it very well.
ZO1 and ZO2, do they just absorb only the hydrocarbons, and that's it? Or do they absorb water as well?
They will take up both. They won't they're not hydrophobic. They will take up the oil and the water. But the advantage we're having with the 1 and 2 only classification or distinction primarily being organic and inorganic is that a prime example might be Paris Island, marine base, where they had 4 or 5 different absorbent products, one for acid, one for petroleum, for aggressives, for caustics. I forget what the other one was. By using our one material, they're able to pick up the full realm of different liquids without having to go
of the things that we're developing, we're kind of excited about, were two things. First, we had the opportunity a couple months back to go out and work with the fire chief at Chicago O'Hare Airport. And they were, obviously concerned about the dusting problem and what foreign particles were getting the engine. Apparently, according to our test, he was very pleased with the way that it performed over there. There is dusting that occurs, but it's a very minor dusting as far as he was concerned. I don't know what the definition, what the threshold is between when it's a problem and when it's not. But one of the things I was telling Chuck that we're kind of excited about, Zomix is good, and when I talked before about its simplicity, it doesn't really require anything. It looks like saccharine, that kind of consistency. So whatever tools and equipment that you have, all you need to do to ensure success is to get a good homogenization of the mixture. But I mean, that's very nice and simple. But in the real world, people are looking for turnkey approaches. Solve my problem and I'll buy a product. We were approached in the middle of October. We were going over to Ramstein Airport Base. They asked us to follow up on a concept that we started to develop last year, and that was an applicator for Zomix out in flight line. And in essence, what we did was to take a street sweeper and modify that to put an applicator onto that. So when a spill occurs out there, that the street sweeper that is now an emergency response vehicle, drives out to the spill, it forms berm around it, collects it, and it drops powder on it while it's misting it down. It controls the dust, and then the street sweeper will go right over it and pick it up because it's instantly non-flammable, non-hazardous, and it goes into the hopper in the back of the truck, and they drive off, and they put it into a pile and then bring it off to the collector. That is being finished this next week, and we're taping that as well, and that's our first unveiling is over in Germany. So we're kind of excited about it because it was their request. We're trying to solve your problems, and we don't know what your problems are. But once we identify what your problems are, we see where Zomix fits. In some areas, it doesn't fit. You have to be realistic on that. But there are a significant amount of areas that it does fit. At least with the DGSC, their major problem is controlling spills. I think about 60% of the problem that the entire DOD has is with petroleum-based spills and solvents, whether that be ground or drums or whatever. And this seems to work very well within them. Bringing in, again, the total life cycle, when you look at all the money, the different budgets that are being invaded by the handling and disposal of hazardous waste. Anybody else?
We do a lot of work also with the EPA plating facilities and things that shut down. They become super fun sites. Have you done any work with the EPA testing Zomix and plating facilities with the metal, heavy metals?
We've done a number of different practical or actual applications in the plating industry. None have been directly with the EPA. They've always been tested and initiated by the generator side. We've had a number of chrome plating, copper plating, circuit board manufacturers using it both to deal with the sludge, and we have one company that was using it in process part of the sludge management. So we've had a lot of success with them with the cyanides.
We've had a lot of problems with bulking and disposal.
We've dealt with a lot of metal sludge type materials.
Yeah, you also have to keep in mind that this product is new in the market. For the last 2 years, we've only been working with the DOD. Management took the approach of, rather than introducing a new product into the private industry is very difficult. So we thought, in doing our market research, we always ask two questions: who else is using it and who said they can. So we thought about, well, if we went to the biggest polluter in the world, which is the government, and they bought into the system, that would answer both questions. So we went to the DOD, they liked our story, they said, well, you proved to us that it works, and then we'll bring it to the system. That's where we are now. We went through all of their hoops and all of the testing, they're convinced that it works, and now we're bringing it out into the field for meetings such as this. And eventually, we'll get to the state regulators and then to the EPA, et cetera. But I guess we first had to prove ourselves that the product does work, and it has value.
It doesn't have to be listed on the NCP product schedule or anything like that, because it's not a dispersal or anything like that.
That's the sort of thing. Yeah, it works regulations work very well with us being a source.
Do you have that that paper with the stock numbers on it?
Yes,
Is
it's
that
in the,
packaging? Okay.
it should be in the brochures,
I know we got that down, San Antonio.
yeah.
Time-wise, we're organized to do a small demonstration product against some of the waste that's been provided by the wire out back, time-wise, because of meetings and so on. So I'll probably adjourn out there and go to that. And I also had a sign-in, log. Anybody that didn't sign in, if they
Yeah, if you want to carry those out. He wants to see how it works and everything. That we use.
This right here, we can know.
Yeah.
Reserve this, you need to go. Marty gives me a free.
I got some game stuff on there. Marty, you wanna, I'm gonna go out to my truck and get my stuff.
Okay.
Hey, Chuck, I got something that's gonna open this?
Yeah, I got a game. I didn't think about that.
Being that you don't need to be listed as some.
Hey, did they move that Bowser back out? Okay.
Are they done in their PPE?
Did I catch everybody's, did everybody get a chance to?
Putting on the PPE? Ours is in that white building, and I know they're not gonna do it. I want that white building.